So in the last session, in regarding the Maoist activities in Bengal, we have seen what was the government response. Now, what was the security response they made? Political consolidation and political reach the government has provided. But in security response, so after the math of Naxalbari rising, the failure to restrain the rebels, the incessant pressure by the Union government to bring the situation down under the control compared to the state government in order five police actions on 5th July 1967. The operation code name was Operation Crossbow. Now, in this event, close to around 1500 policemen were deployed in the affected areas who set up police camps in almost all the villages. The police conducted door-to-door cordon and search operation, carried out constant raids in the Naxalite hideouts. So in this process, the police arrested around 562 rebels, including several top leaders like Jangal Santhal. Subsequently, the several followers of Naxalbari movement also surrendered. Surprisingly, police did not face any stiff resistance by the peasants and the Adivasis by the end of July 1967. The entire uprising of Naxalbari adjoining areas was put into down. In response to the terror unleashed by CPI-ML cadres in the second phase of the peasant uprising, Debra and Gopi Ballabhpur belt. Initially, the police set up camps in the affected area, but the ill-equipped local police were ineffective in the face of the violence unleashed by CPI-ML cadres. Such was the terror of Naxalites that no one in the affected villages dared to lodge a complaint even against the revolutionaries, not even the wives and the sons of the landlords who were killed by Naxalites. In the absence of the cooperation from the locals, police also refused to enter in the villages without armed protection, summoning the advantage of established liberated area. Charu Majumdar said, once an area is liberated from the clutches of the class enemies, some are annihilated while some other flew. The repressive state machinery is deprived of its eye, ear, and making it impossible for the police to know who is a guerrilla and who is not, who is stealing his own land and who tills that of the Jotedars. So there was lack of identification of insurgents. As situation started deteriorating, the state government brought Eastern Frontier Rifles, which is an armed police force of the state, in order to strengthen the local police in the affected area. According to the newspaper reports, about 1200 EPR personals were stationed in Gopi Ballabhpur and 700 were stationed in Debra. Since Gopi Ballabhpur and Debra belt were also proximate to Bihar border, Baharagora in Singhbhum district of Bihar was also affected. A coordinated police action of the two states was undertaken. The Bihar government posted 400 Bihar armed police force in Baharagora to block the flight of Naxalites and to neutralize them. The state government also asked the union government for the deployment of CRPF, thus strengthened the police. They started counter-insurgency operation. The strategy employed was encirclement and suppression, wherein the police along with the EFR and CRPF encircled the village and conducted door-to-door search to nab suspect Naxalites. In fact, the police was reported authorized to shoot to kill and use LMG, light machine guns, hand grenades if necessary. Chased by the police, the guerrilla squads dispersed to the wider area, which they carried out annihilation campaign and political propaganda. Meanwhile, the Second United Front government led by CPIM government fell in March 1970. The president rule was imposed in the state. This provided the union government to crack down upon the CPI-ML insurgents in Debra and Gopi Ballabhpur with the help of local police, the EFR and CRPF. The police raided the village where the CPI-ML cadres were established bases and arrested scores of cadres and sympathizers. The encirclement and suppression strategies was also successful in breaking the will of the insurgent. The Maoist leadership also admitted that police encirclement was responsible for our guerrilla squad. Absolute loss of initiative. Our aggressive tactics of launching offensive steadily degenerated into the escapist mode of passive defense. The counter-insurgency operations against the CPI-ML in the urban areas began in 1970s with the imposing of Bengal Suppression Terrorist Outrage Act, Bengal Suppression Terrorist Outrage Act, 1936. Under the Act, the police was empowered to detain a person on the ground of suspicion for the period of 24 hours. In the November 1970, the West Bengal Prevention of Violent Activities Act was enforced, which gave the police greater power, including the arrest without warrant. The first important component of launching a counter-offensive against the urban guerrilla was to develop an efficient and effective counter-insurgency force. This was done by reorganizing the Kolkata Police Force, providing the police personnel with adequate training with arms and ammunition, and ensuring their personal safety as well as the safety of the families against the Naxalite attacks. The heavily comprised Calcutta Police Association was dissolved by enforcing Police Force Restriction of the Rights Act on 1st November 1970. Alongside a series of directives were also issued to make the policemen more alert against the attack. Police personnel on the duty with arm were even directed to tie their rifles, revolver, the web or the leather belt on the right side. To prevent snatching of the arms, the policemen were in fact warned against any loss of the arms and ammunition. The second component of an effective counter-insurgency strategy is to precise intelligence. In this regard, the city police faced problem initially, especially in the profiling of CPI-ML leaders and cadre, because of CPI-ML did not develop any mass basis organizations to mobilize sympathizers and recruit cadres. In absence of front organizations, the police did not have any members exact relevant information about the identity of the members. The police, however, suspected that the Naxalites who were retreating from the rural areas were operating in the urban had formed an alliance with criminals and anti-socials. This suspicion was corroborated by the post-mortem reports of personnel alleged killed by the Naxalites. Upon examining the cut marks, the police concluded that the knife thrusts were made by an experienced criminals rather than amateur cadres. Armed with this evidence, the police zeroed upon the criminals and anti-social arrested them. More often than not, the arrest provided police further information about the Naxalites in the city. Based on the information, the Kolkata police categorized CPI-ML cadres into three groups. First, comprising of criminals. Second, a group of non-political students who are willy-nilly got dragged into the movement. Third were dedicated students. Since the police had to mainly deal with anti-socials and the detectives, and the special branch of the police were restricted to gather the intelligence, while persons belonging to the first and third categories were either arrested or killed. The person in the second category was dealt softly. In most cases, the youth were let off after the warning in the lieu of information about their hardcore compatriots. Furthermore, to understand the extent of urban terrorism, the police reorganized their field station accordingly. Small and manageable police divisions were carved out existing unwieldy police stations. The officer in charge of these police stations were given the responsibility of tackling Naxalite terror in the area of jurisdiction. This was based on the understanding that police station has required ground level intelligence to identify the perpetrators, given the most of them were criminal and anti-social elements. Moreover, the police also selectively recruited several of the criminals as home guards to work as informers in the due of daily payments. Being locals, criminals knew their locality well and could correctly identify the ideologues from the student and youth quarter. Apparently, these home guards were presented as police people resistance to Naxalite depredations. Besides, the police also carried out cordon and search operations known as combing operations. In such operations, the army or the CRPF threw a cordon around the colony. Then police entered the search each and every house of the suspected Naxalites. Such cordon and search operations became frequent after successful holding of the state elections in the March 1971. For the operations, the police took the assistance of the army, BSF and CRPF to avoid leakage of the information, as the authority did not have any contact with the locals. Moreover, the armed forces were disciplined and efficient in stopping people inside the cordoned area. During the cordon and search operations, more often than not, youth of the colony were rounded up and forced to explain their presence in that place. If someone failed to explain, then the person was immediately arrested. There were many tales of police high-handedness during and after cordon search. It has been alleged that the police arrest the youth, some being innocent, torture them for the information, then kill them in cold blood. Human rights violation. There were also several stories of encounter killing by Kolkata police during anti-national operations in the city. Between March 70s and 71, 1783 CPIML cadet was killed by the police in Kolkata and its suburbs, but unofficial figures were reportedly double the murder. Charul Mazumdar was arrested from his hideout on 16 July 1972. With his arrest, the arrest of large number of CPI-ML cadres, the urban movement in Kolkata and adjoining city was effectively put down. The remaining urban Naxalites were spent force indulging in the sporadic incident of terror for next 2 years. History shows that the guerrilla warfare cannot be sustained in urban areas. The CPI youth and the student activist has carved out liberated zone in Kolkata and its adjoining areas, similar to the base areas in the rural areas. To fail to realize that terrain plays an important into sustenance of the base areas. A forested or a hilly area is ideal for a guerrilla warfare because of the terrain is remote and inaccessible to the counter-insurgent. The administration also does not have its reach in these areas, allowing the insurgent to win over the population by providing them the basic needs instead of justice through kangaroo's court. In return, they demand food and shelter from the people. In the cities and town, administrative reach is all pervasive, and every area is connected with the roads, enabling police or army to move quickly and smash the hideouts of the insurgent. The pattern was discerned in Kolkata. Moreover, the city dwellers, especially the middle class, were repelled by the mindless killings of CPI-ML cadres. They had also voted for peace, as against the CPIM ideology in 1972. Moreover, the pressure exerted by the police compelled them not only to refuse the food and shelter to the urban guerrillas, but also to provide the information about them to the police. While urban movements in Kolkata and its suburbs were brought down by effective police action, ably assisted by the Indian Army and Central Armed Police Forces, in the rural Maoist movement was crushed through the joint action of Indian Army, CRPF, BSF, and the district police. The preparations of Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971 saw an induction of additional unit of CRPF and army in the state. So when the state government was dismissed and the president rule was imposed in West Bengal, the union government deployed the central forces to tackle Naxal insurgency, especially in the counter side. Operation Steeplechase. Operation Steeplechase was launched 1st July 15th August 1971. This operation was coordinated amongst actions by Indian Army, CRPF, local police, contiguous districts in West Bengal, Bihar, Odisha that were affected in Naxalite violence. During this operation, corps of the Indian Army with about 45,000 troops were deployed in Medinapur, Purulia, Vrindavan, Burdwan, Birbhum district of West Bengal, as well as district of Singhbhum, Dhanbad, Santhal Parganas of Bihar, and in Mayurbhanj district of Odisha. The army carried out area of dominance exercise in which it surrounded the Maoist affected villages, sealing the entry and exit routes. While the army formed outer cordon, the CRPF formed an inner ring, which allowed police along with the district magistrate to enter and search every house. Suspected Maoist cadre were arrested. Weapons and documents were also seized at that time. Initial phase, the army, however, faced few setbacks because of the local police was not able to provide a precise information about the rebel and hideouts. There was also a report of turf wars between three organizations subsequently. Indian Army was successful in effectively cordoning the villages, forcing the cadres to flee to the forest and the hilly terrains. While during the combining operations, the cadres were easily surrounded and either captured or killed. Once the rebel fled the village, the peasantry could not offer any resistance to the Indian Army and the armed police. Absence of people militia and revolutionary committees, the lack of sophisticated weapons were the main reasons for the peasants to capitulate in front of superior might of the state. As discussed earlier, West Bengal witnessed a resurgence of Maoist violence between mid-2000s. Initially, the state government was reluctant to act against the Maoist, but targeting of the Chief Minister's convoy in 2008 changed its attitude towards the rebel. In 2009, the West Bengal government banned CPI Maoist under the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1908 and under the Criminal Law Act of 19, not UIPA. Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. However, the Maoists who were arrested were booked under UAPA, thus sending a clear signal about the government intention of tackling the Maoist problem effectively. Further, in March 2010, it decided to raise a special force on the line of Greyhounds. Greyhounds was there in Andhra Pradesh. What we have discussed in Andhra Pradesh lectures, it was a police force. While the state government deployed the police to counter Maoist, much of the anti-Maoist operations were conducted by CRPF, including Elite Cobra Commando Battalion for Resolute Action Battalion. For instance, to recapture Lalgarh in July 2009, 5 companies of CRPF was deployed. They were assisted by the 2 companies of state police and 1 of the BSF. The strategy employed, the police would first push back the villages to separate them from the Maoist and minimize the collateral damage, and then CRPF would target the Maoist camps located deep inside. The armed cadres of CPIM also participated in the fight against the Maoist in the tribal belts of the state. Anti-Maoist operations in the Lalgarh was also long-drawn battle because of the CRPF were first hamstrung by the decision of political leadership not to open fire during the attacks on Maoist camps. Second, the CRPF did not have adequate information regarding the terrain and the movement of the Maoist rebels. Much of their information about the Maoist rebel and their camps were taken from the second-hand sources such as video footage. The Maoists not only had a good knowledge about the terrain, they were also forewarned about the movements of the CRPF and SAP companies by the villagers. Last but not the least, the Maoists also deployed the women and children in the front to act as a shield against any action by the armed police. Despite these constraints, the joint forces, through sustained anti-national operations, could re-establish the writ of the government in the affected region. Incrementally, Lalgarh itself was freed from the clutches of the Maoists by June 2009 after an intense battle spanning for a couple of days. These anti-national operations were, however, not restricted to Lalgarh and the adjoining area only, but carried out into 18 different affected districts of Maoist violence. Thus, 2011, through sustained and political backed anti-national operations, the Maoist menace in the state was tackled successfully. In fact, the killing of the Kishanji effectively brought an end of the Maoist movement in the state. Kishanji was killed in the encounter of a joint operation of police, CRPF and Cobra in Kushbani forest in Paschim Medinipur district by 24 November 2011. What was the governance at this time? In the first phase of communist movement from 1948 to 52, the state government employed its bureaucracy to launch anti-communist campaign and manage public perception. The local subdivisional officers were dispatched in the rural areas where they denounced communist ideology and methods and highlighted the developmental work implemented by the government. The officials also distributed a small national flag, photos of national leaders to the villagers free of cost, which could be pinned to their shirts. The bureaucracy managed the media by supplying information about the arrest of communist leaders on one hand, and on the other hand, they planted news about various development initiatives launched by the state government. Then, during the second phase of the communist movement, realizing the poor implementation of the land reform was one of the single most reasons for the peasants uprising, the first United Front government in 1967 once again galvanized its administration machinery as well as mobilized the peasantry to implement the land reform. See, galvanized as a term, it means like suppose that if you have a rusted iron bar, to make it clear, strong scrubbing, and then painting is called galvanization. So renovation simply. The objective was to take care of the land legally vested upon its, but it was still in the possessions of the landlord and redistribute them to the landless peasants. It is estimated that around 2.5 lakhs acres of the land was redistributed to an equal number of peasants during this period. For example, the Naxalbari incident, the state government set up Khana Land Reform Committee in each police stations in Siliguri, Fansideva, Naxalbari, Kharibari to expedite the implementation of the land reform, which an aim to isolate the extremist. The committees has to look into the matters of inter alia action against the Malapai transfer of land, prosecution of the case of the eviction of Bargadas, educate all sections of the society about their rights and obligation under law. Interestingly, the land settlement records of Siliguri compiled after the Naxalbari peasants uprising revealed that all the leaders of the movement owned substantial land holdings, few in excess of the ceiling. Even Charu Majumdar has stated in his writing that Naxalbari struggle was not for the land or the crop, but for the political power. Nevertheless, the government took upon itself to redistribute land to as many leader landless peasants as possible, even if the amount of the land given to each peasant was less, so that the discontentment amongst the peasant could be minimized. The coming to the power of the Second United Front in 1969 saw the intensification of right to deduct and cancel malified transfers of the land. In 1967-70, close to 6 lakh acres of the ceiling surplus land were redistributed by the state government. Incidentally, much of the redistributed land has been forcibly taken by the sharecroppers during the uprisings. However, when the Congress government came into power 72, it is stated that the peasant uprising will not be tolerated, and therefore lands that were occupied by the peasants during the United Front government were evicted and given back to the landlords from whom they were snatched before. That the land reform legislation did not succeed in bringing an equitable distribution of the land in the state was revealed in the study conducted by the Directorate of Land Record Surveys in 71. The amount of land vested in the state up to June by the time implementation of West Bengal Eviction Act 1953 was supposed to have been completed in all respect, around 15,73,284 acres of arable lands including culturable waste, out of which 1,43,77,572 acres of arable land including cultivate in the state, that is only 9.5% of the total arable land actually vested under the West Bengal Eviction Act as against ideal target of 33.3%. Our achievement was only about 1/4 of the target, a poor performance by any standard. So when the CPI Maoist government came into the power in 1977, it resolved to implement the land reforms in all earnestness. According to the government launched Operation Barga on September 1978, under which it started recording the names of the Bagadas who still remained unrecorded in the records of the rights. Once again, the government involved the peasant organizations and the rural poor in the operations. The government set up reorientation camps, especially in the areas with large concentration of Bangladeshis, to educate the peasants about the rights and spread awareness about the importance of recording their names in the record of right. These camps were also meant to sensitize the local officials to the plight of the rural, poor and landless laborers. Furthermore, the state government directed the local revenue officers and the junior land officers to collect the information about the Benami land from the peasant organizations. The government also directed the officials to ascertain if any land is cultivated by the hired laborers, if they were paid the portion of the produce as wages. If so, then such laborers were to be recorded as Bagadas. For successful implementation of the land reform, the government also carried out 3 changes in the administrative structure. For the land management and land settlement branches were partially integrated. The second position of land reform commissioner was re-implemented, and the third additional advocate general was created to follow the land reform cases in High Court. Operation Barga was successful in recording the Bagadas. By 1981, it recorded around 12 lakhs Bagadar for a total of 11.5 94 beneficiaries received the vested agricultural land from the government. During the same period, the state government also initiated a pilot project of 1978 wherein the agricultural credits were given to the recorded Vagadas beneficiaries, vested around 23 selected clusters in 12 districts. Around 19 crores of 79,79,883 sharecroppers and beneficiaries of vested lands were given a loan by 11 public sectors and cooperative bank. The agricultural loans not only freed the cultivators from the clutches of moneylender but also encouraged them to increase the production of their agricultural land. In fact, agricultural production of West Bengal during 1980s was 5.5%, which was much above than the national average. The land reform could bring about only a limited economic gain to the state. Lack of the additional agricultural input such as proper irrigations, fertilizers to increase the output, as well as the absence of the industrialization pushed the state towards the dire economic situation, shrinking the resources and general apathy of the administration towards the welfare of the people, especially the tribal people, provide a fertile ground for the Mayas to spread their influence in Jungle Mahal. Recognizing the lack of the development as a key factor of the resurgence of Maoist violence in the tribal-dominated belt in the state, Mamata Banerjee government implemented Chief Minister's special package in Jangal Mahal. The package includes several development initiatives such as providing basic amenities, infrastructure, economic opportunities. The package was implemented in the conjunction with the central sponsored scheme such as Integrated Action Plan as a center-sponsored development scheme for the most affected district, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, Indira Awas Yojana, etc. For effective implementation of the union and state government sponsored package, Mamata Banerjee ensured speedy inflow of resources in the region. At the same time, she made the bureaucracy solely responsible instead of local panchayat. Mamata Banerjee personally supervised the implementation of these projects in Jangal Mahal. The state government also gave priority to teaching Santhali language in 900 schools in the region. So, summary: the exploitation of the landed peasants and tribal people by the landlords and the moneylenders in the Bengal provided the ideal issue of communists to exploit the state rebellions against the government over the period of time. Faced with the communist challenge, successive state governments employed multi-pronged strategies to deal with the problem. So, when Teen Bhaga movement broke out, the Bengal government primarily employed repressive measures to come down heavily on the fledgling communist insurrection. Immediately post-independence, the localized communist-led peasant uprising was tackled with the twin tactics of managing public perceptions and crushing the rebellion. Once the CPI withdrew their agitation, the state government enacted several land reforms in effort to provide a protection to the sharecroppers, landless peasants, as well as Adivasis. However, the failure of the government to effectively implement the land reform caused the widespread discontentment amongst the cultivators, leading to 1967 Naxalbari associated peasants uprising. This time around also, the state government employed coercive method to deal with the Naxalites. The police was strengthened and additional battalions of Indian Army Central Armed Police Forces were deployed to conduct anti-national operations, anti-Naxal operations. The CPIM Congress also pitted their cadres against the Naxalite to finish them off completely. It was only after the communist rebellion was put down firmly that CPIM government implemented land reforms effectively. These efforts were succeeded in addressing the long-held grievances of the peasants. The CPIM government also co-opted for the rural croplands by providing them the stakes in local self-government as well, distributing economic lajes. While these measures helped in satisfying the aspirations of the rural people, neglect of the tribal people and the forestry tax by the government proved detrimental to the peace and tranquility of the state. The grievances of the tribal people was exploited by the Maoists. Once again, they started a movement. In response, the state government dealt with the Maoist rebel with a heavy hand. At the same time, it effectively implemented developmental package in the tribal-dominated areas to address tribal discontentment, thus employing coercive methods against the Maoist people as well, catering the needs of the peasants as well as the tribal people, providing socio-economic political benefits to all sections of the rural areas. West Bengal successfully tackled the Maoist problem in the state. So this was about the West Bengal state. Reasons, economical factors to gain the political power, getting influenced by Mao Zedong, Chinese Revolution, everything happened. And initially there was certain political unwill also to curb these things. They were just thinking, brooding, and all those things, brooding, and all those things. But at the end, finally, it got managed due to state efforts. Now, coming tomorrow, our next session will be having a session on Punjab militancy. This is a very specialized session, so everyone should see, join. Coming to the today's question. The uprisings in the Indian neighbors creates a mental conditioning for internal security happening. Nepal, Bangladesh are majorly seen as the government failure to establish socio-economical and political satisfaction. Discuss it. The uprisings of in the Indian neighbors creates a mental conditioning for internal security happening. Nepal, Bangladesh are majorly seen as government failure to establish socio-economic and political satisfaction amongst its people. Discuss it. Now, this is the question. Reply it, and you can send your answers to this number. It will be reviewed and sent back. Best of luck. Next session will be on Punjab.